Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and I'd like to take you through 3 steps in Bible study in our continuing survey of biblical interpretation. First of all, when we approach the scriptures, it's good to, we're going to have to look at the text. And so our first step is going to be that of observation, to look at the passage and just ask the question, what does it say? Now, we can be talking about just one small paragraph, or we can be speaking of a passage or an entire book or the entire Bible, and ultimately we're going to ask all of those questions when we approach the scriptures, because there's always the context, and then the larger context, and then even the larger context of the entire Bible. But our first question is, what does the passage say? Next, we ask the question of interpretation, and in interpretation we ask, what does the passage mean by what it says? Now, I don't want to put the cart before the horse. First, I ask, what does it say? And I look at it carefully, very carefully. In fact, usually our biggest fault is we jump to a conclusion before we've spent our maximum amount of time in observation. But now I ask the question of, what does it mean by what it says? And then thirdly, I ask the question of, how do I take that passage and apply it? In other words, what does it mean to me? Now, very oftentimes we want to jump right to that third aspect. We want to jump right to application without laying a proper foundation of either observation or interpretation. But I do think that we need to separate these into 3 specific steps. A little like the construction of a building. Observation is the foundation, and I cannot build a skyscraper on a chicken coop foundation. Next, interpretation is like the construction of that building, and it takes time, it takes effort. You know the old saying, Rome wasn't built in a day. Well, buildings aren't built in a day, and I ought to be careful in my interpretation as I carefully look to see what the passage says, and now asking that question of, what does it mean? But if I've built a building and I don't move into it, it's really rather useless. If I've interpreted a passage, I've spent my time in observation, and then I correctly interpreted it, it really hasn't accomplished anything if I do not apply it. So application is moving into the completed building and now residing in it. That's the end goal. We're not just about laying foundations, we're not just about building buildings, we're about moving into it, and we're about taking the scriptures and applying them to our lives.